Well, the wait is almost over for the Matric class of 2022. In just a few hours, the final pass mark for the more than 900,000 pupils who sat for the 2022 National Senior Certificate will be made public. But before that happens, the Department of Basic Education will give a technical briefing. In fact, it's happening right now. Let's take you live now.
We are starting with the technical presentation. It's a very long presentation. I'm going to try and run through it as quickly as I can. Also want to acknowledge and appreciate the two MECs, MEC Gade, MEC Western Cape, and MEC Eastern Cape. The time is now. The day that the class of 2022 has been waiting for 13 years has come. The hour is upon us. As I've said, I'm going to try and run through the technical report as quickly as I can. I'm going to move over to the next slide. Unfortunately, my laptop is not synchronized to the mainframe to reflect on the screen. I'm now moving to the third slide. We believe that since 2020, our system has demonstrated amazing resilience. The past 3 years have been the most difficult years, I believe, to humanity. Not only to South Africa, but to the entire globe. But our teachers, our parents, our officials, our partners, stakeholders, oversight structures of parliament and leadership in government have really supported our learners to demonstrate amazing resilience. Let me remind our country that in 2020, some countries halted their education system. The so-called first world countries completely halted their education systems. In our own continent, some countries delayed even their public exams. So I really want to convey our greatest appreciation and thanks to our nation, to our partners for having insulated our learners and ensure that they secure the future of the class of 2020, 21, and now 2022. In terms of the introduction, this is our mantra drawn from the National Development Plan. 3 cardinal points that are very clear from this extract. 1 is that South Africans should have access to an education and training system of the highest quality. This is what every public servant, every partner should ensure that we achieve and work hard every day, that South Africans eventually have access to an education and training system of the highest quality. And we do that by improving our learning outcomes, working very hard every day, every year, to ensure that our learning outcomes are improved. We improved the learning outcomes of the class of 2020, even though the enrollment number increased. The same applies to the class of 2021. We will hear later how the class of 2022 would have performed. The last important point is to perform at a comparable level with countries of the same development as us in international tests. We've been improving in TIMSS, we've improved in SACMEC, we remain the same in terms of pills, and our intention is to work very hard through a systemic evaluation to ensure that we improve even in pills. This is where we derive our mandate as a sector, basic education sector, Action Plan 2019 towards Schooling 2030, aligned to the NDP, very clear indicators that we are expected to achieve as we move towards 2030. This is linked to other international obligations that we have in terms of Education 30 of UNESCO. The same applies to our own continent. African Agenda 2063, the Continental Education Strategy for Africa 2016 towards 2025. What is the size and shape of the sector? This is who we are as basic education. 10 education departments, 9 provincial education departments, plus the National Education Department, 75 districts. As you can see, 24,000 schools, 889 circuits. You also have public schools that are 22,000, and then you also have private or independent schools that are 2,558. Furthermore, I'm going to move to the next slide just to indicate that out of 13,409,249 learners that we have in the system, 12.7 million come from the public schooling sector. 12.7 million. This number has been growing ever since 2020. When we got hit by COVID, we were around 12.4 million combined. We are now at 13.4 million combined. It's also important to indicate that as a sector, our performance is measured against social justice principles. In fact, most education systems across the world measure their performance against these principles. These are the same principles that are also embedded in Sustainable Goal number 4 of UNESCO, which we also expected to report on regularly. And this year is the year of the General Conference of UNESCO. We will also be giving an update report to UNESCO. General Household Survey, because of COVID, we didn't have data for 2020 and 2021. At least this time around, we do have data. In terms of participation in education institutions, South Africa ranks among the best in the world in terms of learners who are supposed to be attending school and are indeed attending school. So it's an issue of access, but as we all know, it does not necessarily translate into other social justice principles of quality, efficiency, and others. In terms of 0 to 4-year-olds, we've taken this responsibility from the 1st of April 2022, but the numbers have been improving, as we can see from 2010 up to 2021, numbers steadily going up. And I was making a joke earlier on when I met with stakeholders. I said the reason why the numbers of 0 to 4-year-old went down, there was one eminent academic and intellectual in our country who discouraged parents from taking their children to school in 2020. And he said, don't think about taking your bundle of joy to school during COVID. I'm sure you can make your own guess who that is. And again, showing 0 to 6-year-old, And we just indicating from 0 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and 5 to 6. As we can see, 6-year-old slightly higher, followed by 5-year-olds, 4-year-old, and the bundle of joy at the lowest level of the graph. And again, age-specific enrollment. Again, we indicating there 7 to 15-year-old, 14 to 18, 16 to 18, and going up to 19, up to 23. It shows a very nice curve going up, increasing in terms of ages that are going up. Now, I've said this before, and I've said this when we presented the results to the President. The problem of South Africa is not so much dropout rate. The problem of South Africa is high failure rate and repetition rate. Let me repeat. The major problem in the Republic of South Africa is high failure rate and high repetition rate, high retention rate. This problem will become clearer as I continue with the presentation. You can see that bulge, particularly towards the senior phase, from grade 7, grade 8, going up and reaching the summit in grade 10, and we know why. The possibility is that some of the institutions are killing learners or are gatekeeping learners. We are tracking that in the system to make sure that we reduce the high failure rate and the retention rate. We've introduced a number of policies in the system to try and deal with that challenge. Most countries in the world apply what is called automatic progression. Education economists, many of them are of the view that there's very little value that you can derive when you get learners to repeat. Because in South Africa, the system is structured in phases. If a learner is unable to meet the requirements in terms of skills, knowledge and competencies in a particular grade, you can actually consolidate that as the child moves from one phase to the other. In fact, education psychologists are of the view that repetition dents the confidence of learners, and it does very little, in fact, to contribute positively to the progression of the learner. Early childhood development, we're just showing here no fee paying. We're also showing those that are paying 1,000 to about 1,200 to 200, 500, and 500 plus. Out of school youth or children, you can see we've brought that down significantly, especially learners of compulsory school going age. Those that still feature in this area are learners that are actually beyond compulsory school going age. But consistent with a notion of no child left behind, would like to get all our young people attending our education institutions. National School Nutrition Program. This is one program that has grown phenomenally. There are two big programs in South Africa. It's HIV and AIDS program, which is probably the biggest in the world. The National School Nutrition Program, in terms of public schooling, is probably the second biggest program. Out of 13.4 million in the system, 9.8 receive feeding every day. There are very few countries that compare with this. But we need to translate all of this to improved learning outcomes. Well, in terms of background and context of the National Senior Certificate, the NSC itself being an important barometer to measure success and progress, international and regional tests I've already indicated, that in TIMS and SACMEC, we've made very good progress. We still need to do the same in PILS. Systemic evaluation, we've started the implementation of that. We should be releasing the results, honorable members, before the end of this year. It has replaced ANA. It will give us a sense of the health of the system. GEC, we are piloting. Once we've gone beyond the pilot, GEC should give us important data which will help to inform parents and learners which pathways to follow from grade 10. That's how important this certificate is, the General Education Certificate. The social justice principles, I have spoken about them. As I've indicated, we've made progress in 4 out of 6, but that should not suggest that we can tick off the 4. There's still a lot to be done, still in the area of progress, redress, equity. We need to do even more work in quality and efficiency. Inclusivity also, we still have a bit that we need to do. Promotion requirements. Professor Balem, this one is for the public and South Africans who do not understand that the National Senior Certificate is a multi-purpose qualification. It doesn't serve only to prepare learners for university. It also serves to prepare people to just be good citizens. Just have a National Senior Certificate, meeting the requirements of the certificate, or if you want to further your studies in universities of technology. So that's what this qualification is intended to do. It's not only to prepare learners for university. If you are interested to go to university, the area in blue, it's very important. You need to meet those requirements. If you want to study in HEIs, require to pursue studies in areas that require you to perform at the level of higher certificate, you need to meet that requirement, or those requirements rather. Diploma, you need to meet those requirements. It's a stratified qualification. It's not a qualification that serves only for a single purpose. The context from which the class of 2022 had to learn and write the exams. Trimmed curriculum from grade 10 and grade 11 to make schooling begin and work. That's what we needed to do in 2020, and we got it right. But we still need to deal with the ramifications of that, because all that we did, we reduced the curriculum to fundamentals that are important to prepare learners for subsequent grades. And we are slowly going back to make sure that we expose learners to even more knowledge and skills. Amendment of program for assessment in grade 10 and grade 11, where school-based assessment had to account for 60% and 40% exams. The majority of countries in the world have developed their systems to place more reliance on school-based assessment. Our country still relies on exams, over-reliance on exams. And I'm going to demonstrate how school-based assessment can be reliable from this presentation. Learning losses, reduction of time for exam, and greater focus on SBAs, learning under COVID-19 conditions for almost 2.5 years, psychosocial support, which was not enough. Some of these learners who are our stars today, they lost their loved ones. They lost their teachers. Some might have lost their guardians, some their parents. So the psychosocial support that was provided assisted, although it was not adequate. We also experienced changes in the curriculum. There's something that we called exam guidelines, as well changes in the assessment that I've referred to earlier on. This class was possibly the worst affected of all the three classes that we've had by COVID. And let me just indicate that when they were doing grade 10, COVID started in 2020. When they were in grade 11, lockdown intensified in 2021. And in 2022, they were in grade 12. Well, load shedding, as we all heard already from learners who wrote through the assessment body of IEB, in fact, Dr. Rakometsi and Chair, I was really appalled to observe the impact of load shedding on learners who essentially should be middle class learners who've got an option for alternative energy as compared to the lot that we have, where you don't have that. But if that has been the case, then you can ask yourself, what impact these learners would have probably felt also through load shedding. Service delivery protests, even during exams, over 1,000 learners in Witbank could not write their maths lit and mathematics on a particular day because their parents, their elder brothers, and their relatives and their neighbors decided that they were going to block roads, that were going to deliver question papers to them. It has become a common feature of our country. However, from the data that we have, this class gave an indication that it could become one of the strongest classes that we've ever had. I repeat, from the TIMSS data, from the ANA data, and even other studies, the indication was that the class of 2022 could be one of the strongest classes that we've ever had, despite the fact that they had the worst impact of the three classes that we've had so far. The results of the class of 2022 is a strong signal of recovery and renewal. And I want to add, going beyond resilience. Now, this is the slide that I referred to earlier on. More often than not, people will say, your input does not equals your output. In grade 1, you had 1.1 learners. Why is it in grade 12, you got 775,000 learners? Big, large systems, I'm sure we know that they don't always work that way. But let's look at this slide. From grade 1 up to grade 3, there seems to be no major problem. I hope we can see that. We retained the million in the main. From grade 5, the reduction begins. And the explanation that curriculum experts are giving and assessment experts is that from grade 4, these learners start to learn in English as the language of learning and teaching. And that starts to have an impact on them. Although they started offering English as a subject, not as the language, but they only start learning and teaching in grade 4. And for them to move from grade 4 to grade 5, you can see the impact of that from the data. What is also important about this data, when you go to grade 10, the numbers start to increase. The numbers start to increase. And the answer seems to be, given the fact that we starting to prepare learners for grade 12, those that are not fit for pupils, they are not allowed to proceed to grade 11. So a bit of gatekeeping and culling of learners begins in grade 10. I must also concede that as part of our weaknesses in the system, we don't really account for learners who go to TVET colleges. Many South Africans think that learners who go to TVET colleges are learners who finish grade 12. Learners who go to TVET colleges are grade 9 learners who would have completed grade 9 and should be going to grade 10. Then they would be proceeding to TVET colleges. Now, this is what I am going to try and do to demonstrate the strength of the cohort of 2022. The class of 2021 in grade 10, they performed at 64.7%. The class of 2022, which is the next column, which is in blue, in grade 10, they performed at 79.4%. I hope we can see the difference so far. Then we move, in grade 11, the class of 2021 performed at 87.1%. And the class of 2022 performed at 80%. The difference is about 7%. It clearly shows that the performance of this class it's quite comparable with classes that have been performing at a very high level. Term 1 in grade 12, again, the class of 2022, performed at 78.8. Part of the motivation that we gave to them last year when we met with them, we said, if there's any class that is expected to come to school every day without fail, it's you, class of 2022. And we also then said to them, there's a possibility from the data that we've been following that you could actually perform better than the previous two classes. This slide then shows the final results of the class of 2021. 76.4%, the class of 2021. Then again, the class of 2020, and we just look at their grade 10 performance, they were at 78.4. And then the class of 2021 in grade 11, you can see it's 80%. And then we bring again the class of 2022. In grade 12, again, term 1, 78.8. Numbers enrolled, 752,000 learners, full-time candidates, part-time candidates. The numbers dropped during the year of COVID, but we can see that these numbers are now picking up, part-time learners, and we're very happy that part-time learners are coming back to finish their schooling and meet the requirements of the National Senior Certificate. This is the same data just put on the table. One province that dropped a little bit, 2,553, which is KZN. KZN contributes between 20 and 25% of the total number of grade 12 learners in the country every year. And KZN determines where the national performance should be virtually every year. If you want to know how we are going to perform nationally, follow KZN. Part-time candidates, as I've said, entered went up. The numbers who wrote, there's a number that slightly went down. In terms of gender, we do have a boy learner problem in the basic education sector, and it's becoming chronic. The sooner we attend to it, the better. In terms of girl learners, overall, they seem to be doing well, and we'll share that even more. Home languages, consistent with the overall drop of KZN, it shows even isiZulu, because KZN is the main contributor of isiZulu as a home language. You can see a drop of 3,572 there. But overall, and what is important is that since 2020, enrollment numbers and numbers of learners who have been writing have just been going up. High enrollment subjects, or your gateway subjects, if you like, we do have a problem in the BCM subjects: accounting, business studies, and economics. If there's any message that I would like to convey to places of worship and to social gatherings, it's for parents to encourage their children to enroll for the subjects. Sooner or later, we'll be importing CAs, chartered accountants, and economists, if we do not ensure that we get more and more learners enrolling for these subjects. Subjects that are relevant now and for the future: areas of specialization, technical subjects. The numbers have grown. We've seen a steady growth in these subjects, which is not enough. Economies of countries that are doing well, it's based on an education system that provides for 60% occupational and vocational education, and 30 to 40% academic. Because one will become a doctor, not everyone will become an engineer, but we need as many plumbers as possible to be even self-employed, to create job opportunities, and so on. MTN told us this morning that they've started creating jobs that they never imagined. So even the areas such as electronics, digital systems are areas where we want to encourage more and more parents and schools to prepare learners from primary schools to be able to offer these subjects. You can see there's a drop in fitting and machining. The rest, there's a steady improvement, but the numbers are not big enough. If there's any area where we need to channel our energies, Professor Balim, even in the public discourse, is to begin to encourage the nation to get its children to move in this direction, in the vocational and the occupational stream. South African Sign Language, the good news is that we've increased in enrollment. We want to concede that we need to provide more support than we are providing at the moment, but the numbers are pleasing, are really comforting as a trend begins to indicate a good growth. You can see we have increased from 128 to 210, almost double the number, South African Sign Language. It would be very interesting that even somewhere in government we can start to promote sign language. There are other states in other parts of the world, language has become a language of the community. It's not only a language of learning. And by the way, these learners are offering sign language as a home language and as a language of learning and teaching. For them, it serves that purpose, double purpose. Progressed learners, except for Northwest, the majority of the provinces rather, drastic reduction. And I think that's what we want to see. Learners meeting the requirements who are proceeding subsequent grades. Full-time enrollment by age, we can see that the 2022 cohort is doing exceptionally well in terms of age-appropriate education progression. Even those who are supposed to be 18-year-olds are, head and shoulder above the rest. And you can see when it comes to over-age learners, they are not even higher. It's instead the class of 2021. So there's a healthy progression that this class of 2022 demonstrated throughout. You know that in basic education we talk about catch them young. You'll see when we talk about how they've performed, that the younger they are in the system, the better they perform. Part-time, you can see is the class of 2021, which seems to be doing better than the class of 2022 here. Enrollment by age and gender. Female learners doing exceptionally well. So this talk in the public about learner pregnancy, delaying them, the data doesn't seem to confirm that. I'm not saying it's the right thing. We need to reduce it to zero. But the data seems to indicate something else. Girl learners are doing exceptionally well in terms of progression. As you can see, especially age-appropriate. But unfortunately, in terms of over-age learners, boy learners seem to dominate. So the boy learner problem that I've raised earlier on, I think is a matter that we still need to deal with. Part-time, percent did not pitch for the exams. And that's very big, because it means learners felt confident to go and write. And they would do that if they are properly supported, if they are prepared, if they are motivated, if they are encouraged. And the percentage is going down, which is very good. Extraordinary support, I'm going to go over the slides quickly, was a Matric which we started in 2020, helped a lot. Even stakeholders attested to that materials were available for learners to learn. There was an increase in the number of those that went for camps. More languages were offered, but the point of departure is home language. For any learner to do well, you start paying attention to home language and other languages and the rest of your subjects, because the languages are going to support you in your performance of your content subjects. We had extensive motivation, top teachers, that we had 6,904 exam centers, 9.8 million scripts. You had 752 full-time candidates and 164,000 part-time candidates, 162 question papers, 10.4 million. I must indicate that our data, there would be, differences. It's attributable to what we get at a given point in time. It keeps changing, especially when it comes to learners who are enrolled and learners who are writing. is the same data which you are going to skip. Standardization. I need to be careful here, Dr. Rakomets, with what I'm going to
Doing
say.
it correctly.
The relationship keeps changing, especially
But then why
when it comes to learners who are enrolled and learners who are writing. This is the same data which you are going to skip. Standardization. I need to be careful here, Dr. Rakomets, with what I'm going to say. The relationship between umalusi and assessment bodies is regulated by a piece of legislation called Genfecwa et al. 3, downward adjustment, 16, upward adjustment. You'll see Romax is 71, 3, I think, is 4.5%, and 16 is 24.2%. What is the trend? I'm sure even if you don't have the actual numbers, you can make an educated guess that the numbers are going up. It's not only the numbers of those who enroll, the numbers of those who meet the requirements of the certificate are just going up. I've shared with you the trends in terms of the performance of this class. The likelihood is that this class demonstrates that performed actually better than the two classes, if not better than many classes that we've ever had. Okay, as we can see, the interesting news is that all provinces seem to have improved. I don't know what was happening this year. There's something that happens with South Africans when they are in a crisis. They seem to outperform themselves. All provinces seem to have improved. There's movement from the bottom, movement in the middle, and even movement at the top. There are no positions that are permanent for any province or any district. All provinces seem to have improved. There's movement from the bottom, movement in the middle, and even movement at the top. There are no positions that are permanent for any province or any district. And you'll see that movement in a few minutes from now. The other good news is that you'd find that a province performs well under fee paying. It's number one, but it's not necessarily the same or retains its position when it comes to independent schools and no-fee schools. I hope you can see that. When we shared this with the president, he said, there's good news for every province. I've never seen something like this, Dr. Rakomets, maybe in my entire career, where there's good news for every province. You know, there's a place for all of us in the sun. I don't know what phenomenon can explain this which is happening here. Well, we can see boy learners. I see honorable members have already made a calculation as to how this class has performed. Okay. In terms of gender, slight reduction from boys, and girl learners still doing well. Passes by qualification, we expect to see an improvement even in terms of bachelors. This class might be, in fact, when we met with them during the year, we said to them, the data that we have from various data sets indicate that you could potentially be the best class ever. Whether they are going to be the best class ever, time will tell, and that time is not far from now. The actual numbers also increased in terms of bachelors, and that's quality. That's quality because it's not only about overall pass rate, it's also about the quality of bachelors. And those are provinces, percentages, and passes by type of qualification. Again, the point that we want to maintain is that provinces have improved across all four qualifications, all four parts of the qualification, rather, or types of qualification. Then we have something that we call bachelor's and diploma, passes ranked by fee status. The point that I made earlier on, I want to move to the next slide just to demonstrate later on what I'm going to explain about that point. Here, we're just indicating performance by qualification type from 2021 and 2022. You can see that 2022 seems to be just outperforming the previous class. I'm so happy. I've been talking about 2022 and 2021 when we motivated the class of 2022. Now 2020 is going to be replaced by 2022. Bachelor achievements by gender, we can again see there a very nice improvement from the girls. You can see the performance of boys just indicating a slight drop. School performance by quintile, poverty ranking, and the point is that many schools that are starting to push the system upwards because schools that historically have established a culture of excellence or performance, good performance, have reached a ceiling. Now, provinces can only improve further if they support schools that historically were called dysfunctional schools to come on board. And we're beginning to see that even in here. You can see that schools that are getting 80 to 100% pass rate, that number has just increased to 3,946. Learners' performance by, again, quintile. And again, the point that we want to make, 80 to 100%, you can see the class of 2022 increasing their number to 401,693 schools, improving in the area of quality, even in terms of poverty ranking, by the way. This is what the president calls a silent revolution. When he looked at the overall performance of the class of 2022, 3 years ago, the president said to us, because in 2005, only 20% of schools contributed to the total number of bachelors in 2005. Only 20%, majority former Model C schools and your independent schools. Then the president said to us 3 years ago that in 3 years, we have to ensure that quintile 1 to 3, which are your poorest categories of schools or grouping of schools, should be performing at 60%. And that started in 2021 at 61.8% against 38.2%. And in 2022, the class of 2022 just raised the bar. It is unprecedented, 64.4% against 35.6%. What it means is that these learners who are getting bachelors are children from the villages, from the informal settlement, who are adding to the installment of the obvious that we know that they are supported and they will be able to get bachelors. Some of these top learners come from schools that were dysfunctional. Schools in the townships, schools in the informal settlement, they come from there. The secret is that as a country, if we want to change the fortunes of our country, the investment has to be in the main in communities of children who come from the poor, the unemployed people of our country. Performance by age and gender, I'm almost done. 10 more minutes, I'll be done. Again, the notion of the younger they are, the better they perform. We even have 15-year-olds in the system. We spotted 13 and 14-year-olds some other day, but we have 15, we have 16, we have 17-year-olds in the system. You see, at the level at which they are performing. The good news is that those who started schooling at 7, they still perform at the required level. In fact, they contributed in the main to the performance of the class of 2022. But you can see a dip. From 19 years, they go down. It becomes lowest at 23, and then it starts picking up, going towards the right, your 30-year-olds. And somebody asked me, are these full-time candidates? They are full-time candidates. Some of them might be people who got retrenched, and they saw opportunity in full-time attendance of school, and they are still doing well, particularly in the villages. Overall achievement by gender, girl learners doing well overall in terms of the appropriate age of schooling. You can see there. And again, boy learners, we're picking up the challenge that I talked about earlier on. And this table is very important in terms of just indicating at what age are people performing at their best. You can see age 16, followed by age 17, and then, of course, age 18. Those are the prime ages of performance, when the mind is still able to get the requisite traction for the young people to be able to learn as best as they can. And again, we just comparing 2020, 2021, and 2022. The situation varies in some ages. The class of 20, for instance, 15, 16, 17, up to 17, the class of, and 18, class of 2020, performing slightly lower than the class of 2021. But the rest of the other ages, the class of 2022, doing exceptionally well. Learners with, inclusive basket, this one I'm going to go over quickly. The green color symbolizes that the province is doing exceptionally well. It's actually leading. Light green means you can get better. Amber means that with enough effort, you can get there. And red and pink means that a lot needs to be done for you to improve. And I'm going to run through this quickly, and I'm going just to show that when it comes to overall pass percentage, you can see there that provinces are competing quite closely with each other. And I think any can get number 1, as you can see. And the issue is that some of them improved by 6.2%. Some improved by 5.3%. And that's why I said there are no positions that are permanent for anyone, whether at provincial level or at district level. And provinces perform at different levels in these different subjects. You can see even in accounting that some provinces are actually performing better than others. And I'm going to go over this because I need to finish. The same applies to mathematics. maths participation and success rate, and physical science. And for instance, one province can be number one in physical science and the other one could be number one in mathematics. So performance would vary in that way, as you can see it here. Technical maths, which is a new subject we introduced in 2018, also provinces computing quite favorably there. You can see the ranking across. I mean, in fee paying, you can see Mpumalanga is leading there. When it comes to no fee paying, you can see that it's Free State. But when it comes to all categories, then technical maths, Free State comes in again to lead in that category. Technical maths, okay, I've covered this one already. Bachelor's achievement according to fee status, and again, you'll find that when it comes to fee paying, as you can see, Free State is leading, but when it comes to independent school, it's a different province. It's Gauteng that's leading when it comes to bachelor's. Distinctions, when it comes to fee paying, you can see that Limpopo is leading. When it comes to independent schools, then KwaZulu-Natal is leading the pack. No fee paying, then it becomes KwaZulu-Natal again. And when it comes to overall leader in distinctions, then Western Cape leads the pack. And that's the indication there. You can see that although Western Cape dropped from 7% to 6.2%, Western Cape is still leading, as you can see, followed by KZN by 6.0%. And I'm sure that by the end of this year, the situation is going to be very interesting between these two provinces. Throughput rate. The Western Cape used to lead here for many years in terms of throughput rate, but the developments are becoming very interesting. Fee paying, as you can see, it's Limpopo. Independent schools is then Eastern Cape. Eastern Cape that's leading in that area. No fee paying, then it becomes Mpumalanga. And then overall winner is in Mpumalanga when it comes to throughput rate. And these are some of the things that made the president to say, there's an excellent story to tell from each and every province in different dimensions of performance. Gone are the days of only overall pass rate and the ranking, because performance is multidimensional. Education receives close to 24% of the total investment of government. It can't be that you analyze performance by overall pass rate and ranking. So these areas that are very important as indicators of performance from the National Development Plan, we assess progress on them per province. And you can see Mpumalanga is leading comfortably there, followed by Limpopo, just close by, and then followed by Western Cape when it comes to throughput rate. Subject performance, South African Sign Language performed at 77.1%. The subjects that are in red, it's an indication of a decrease or a drop in the performance. And the ones that are in black, there's an improvement. Again, official first additional language, you can see isiNdebele dropped, isiXhosa dropped, and Setswana dropped, and the rest went up. Non-language subjects that are selected, you can see that business studies went down, and then history went down, and then we can also see that mathematics went down. Technical subjects, these are the subjects that are important for now and for the future, mixed bag. Some of them went up and some of them went down. You can see that there's quite a number where they've dropped, slightly. It's a slight drop, it's not a major drop. District performance, again, 80 to 100%. You can see that 3,946 schools, again, in terms of the performance of schools per interval, performing at 80 and 100%, which is much higher than what happened in 2021. This is 2021, as you can see. There were 2 districts between 50 and 59, and then 10 at 60 to 69, 37 at 70 to 79, and 26 at 80 and above. Let's look at 2022. Thank you very much, ma'am. We no longer have districts performing below 50%. No longer have districts performing at 50 to 59. We only have 4 districts performing at 60 to 69. We now have an increase towards this side, 70 to 79, 31, 80 and above. We've increased that to 40. 10 top districts, you can see the level of their performance. Number 1 would have performed at 90.8. I'm sure some people are beginning. And as I said, the good news is that there's improvement across the board. The challenge is the quantum of the improvement. Others improve far better than others, and they just have to overtake them. And as they move up, they meet others coming down. Top 10 districts by fee status. Again, a very interesting picture. Fee paying there, you can see, although we have not reflected the names of the districts. In other words, the picture changes. It doesn't remain the same, even with top 10 districts and bottom 10 districts. When it comes to fee paying, independent schools, and no fee paying, the positions keep changing there. I've explained this one. Learners with special education needs. 2021, the performance, as we can see, across different categories for 2021. When we go to 2022, there is an improvement of 79.9% as against to 80.8%. It's a drop of 0.8%, Honorable Van der Walt. I'm sorry, I wish we could talk about much more positive. But remember that they chose to take 7 subjects instead of 5. They've taken a bigger challenge, and they are saying they can perform the same, if not better than learners who are in ordinary schools. And that should be applauded by the country. Progressed learners, there's also an improvement here. This is 2021. 2022, we can see that the drop only is in the Western Cape. The rest of the other provinces have improved. And you can see who number 1 is there. Mpumalanga by 54.5, very close with Free State at 54.4. Achievements by type of progressed learners, there's an increase across those types of the qualification from bachelor's to NSC. Achievements of progress learners only, you can see that Mpumalanga is leading, followed by Free State, as I said, KZN, and the rest of the other provinces. The other important point to consider, the more you support your weaker learners, the higher you go in terms of your performance. In terms of distinctions, we remained more or less the same at 4.2% because of the numbers that have increased from 2021 to 2022. There are more bachelors this year than last year, as you can see. And here are the distinctions. You can see those subjects in red, they dropped, and those that are in black, it means they improved. Progressed learners, they got distinctions, and these are learners who would have not met the requirements of grade 11. And I want to draw the attention of the public to even 6 of these learners who have achieved, in fact, 6 of them achieved distinctions in mathematics and 5 in physical science. These are progressed learners. As we always say, there is no dustbin for human beings in South Africa. Social grants, an improvement, as you can see, from 65.5 to 71.2% of social grants, learners who benefit from social grants. Active, as always, from 86.3, from 86.3 in 2021 to 87.2. And there's an improvement across the board in active 71.1 to 75.3. Improvement across the board. If they continue to get this support, Honorable Mashabela, you can see how excellent these young people perform. Maybe in Parliament you must debate to have them insulated until they finish grade 12, and only then can they drop the grant so that they can then be taken over by other sources of funding. Social grants, achievement by gender. We can see that girl learners there, female learners at 70.3 compared to 72.5. Perform slightly lower than the boys this year. Social grants by performance of qualifications type, you can see there's an increase across the board on those qualifications type. Correctional services, I see the National Commissioner in the meeting. In 2021, it was 80.2%. In fact, the representative of the National Commissioner, 89.2. In 2022, the performance went up to 95.9. Somebody said they perform better than learners out there. So the support that they get, inmates in the correctional services facilities, we want to salute the correctional services line function. Thank you very much for supporting them. They'll come out as better qualified inmates who I think we should make opportunities available to them. Part-time, those are full-time, part-time at 40%, and this year a slight improvement of 2%. A drop from 40% to 37.3%. Performance of part-time candidates, few subjects that went up, and most of the subjects have gone down. I know that I have to prepare to account to the portfolio committee about this. Now, we summarize the performance in terms of the 5 social justice principles. The numbers have increased across the board. And I just want to conclude by saying The class of 2022 demonstrated amazing resilience. It also demonstrated a maturing system to deal with unexpected challenges, a significant improvement across all areas. We want to commend the teachers, the learners, the parents, all stakeholders who supported the class of 2022. We believe that we are in a trajectory of rewriting our story. We are not there yet, We are not there yet. But we are starting to tell a new story. We have renewed the story along the way. And as we approach 2030, we are getting close to meeting the target of 80% performance that the National Development Plan said we must achieve. Thank you very much for your indulgence. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon to you, and you've been watching the technical briefing, which is one of the most critical aspects of the matric results. That's Matanzi Mamweli there, the Director General of the Basic Education Department, and some of what has come out is what we've been told over time is that how resilient this class has been, COVID-19, and also experiencing difficulties with load shedding. But when you look at even, results of progressed learners, for example, and it's something that over time has been a bone of contention. You're looking at the fact that 6 of them got distinctions in maths and 5 in physical science is something that is encouraging, because there's been a serious contention here as to whether learners should be progressed or not.
Yeah, that's been one of the controversies. And look, he sounds delighted. Bongiwe, we couldn't see all the figures there, but the hints are that this is a great achievement, specifically because the class of last year experienced in grade 10, they were the cohort that experienced COVID-19, and then last year, the most intense year of load shedding on record. So he's saying they're resilient, and he gave us some clues. He said that all provinces have improved. So we're going to look at a better pass rate. And in fact, he did give us a number that's really interesting. And remember, the poorest schools are important here. South Africa has a racialized past. The poor schools have experienced that COVID-19 pain worse, the load shedding pain worse. But he said the bachelor passes above 64% in the lowest quintiles, which sounds wonderful.
And definitely sounds wonderful, Francis. I mean, you're listening to all provinces showing signs of improvement. And the interesting thing about the improvements is that they're not only at the top, it's bottom, middle, as well as, the top. And also looking at the fact that for me, which was interesting, is how no district is now below 50%. No district is below 60. And so that is amazing. And you can think about some of the districts that we've seen in some of the provinces where they would even get as low as 30%, 40%. And now to see how districts are fighting for that top position is also something that's going to encourage these learners. And you think about, I remember the introduction of technical maths was another thing where, a hot potato where some were saying it's not a good idea, but look at the fact that they're getting stronger, despite the fact that it was introduced in 2018. So it's going to be interesting to see what we get to hear tonight. And I'm hoping that Matlako, when we speak to her, is also able to talk to us about the problem that always exists every single year, which is the tracking of learners from grade 1 to grade 12, and how the system continues to have shortfalls there.
So the throughput rate, and yes, that goes back to the National Development Plan, this sad situation where many people enter the system and they do not come through. So we have the figures there. 1.17 million students started grade 1, and among the full-time students, 756,000 left matric. So 400,000 students missing along the way. And as you were saying earlier, we don't actually know if they dropped out or if they entered technical colleges. That information is not there. But it's 1 in 3 not finishing school. However, the good news there was the Director General saying the throughput rate is improving. If you look at the pass rate, even considering those kids in Mpumalanga doing well, 72%. So at least it's being tracked, I think, more decisively, acknowledged more decisively. He was saying we can't ignore something like this, that along the way, students are lost in this country.
And it's important, Francis, for them to focus on this particular area, because one thinks about the fact that we've had technical briefing after technical briefing every year, and this is one of those areas of concern. But interestingly, today, when he was saying that they don't know whether they are going to to TVET colleges, because you can go to a TVET college from grade 9. Now, how do you then not know if this learner has gone to a TVET college or they've simply dropped out, is also the flaws that he's identified in the system. And interestingly, with those numbers as well, Francis, is that from grade 1 to 4, they seem to be there, but the numbers are dropping. But in grade 4 and 5, when they start being taught in English, then the numbers go down again. But then the numbers go up in grade 10, and they say when the numbers are going up in grade 10, then they go down, because essentially they are simply preparing them for Matric, and they almost like saving them. But if we're still in 2023, are talking about a tracking of the learners, it shows that this is an area that they need to pay special attention to.
All right, look, one of the controversies that will remain is the pass rate. We know that this is a political issue. Build One South Africa is saying 30% in several subjects for the pass rate is too low. So let's talk about how all this pans out, and somebody interested in poverty and education coming up shortly. Well, in less than an hour, the Basic Education Minister, Angie Motshekga, will release the results. That will be a ceremony held at Mosaic Church in the west of Johannesburg. So that will be at 6 o'clock, we hope, and we'll bring it to you in full.